You left the room for 3 minutes. Maybe it was to get a glass of water. Maybe it was to answer the door, check something in the kitchen, take a call. You were gone for 3 minutes, maybe 5. And when you came back, your jumping spider was at the edge of its space, at the nearest point to the door you had walked through, facing the door, waiting. Most people who notice this assume it's coincidence. The spider happened to be there, it was moving around and ended up at that spot. That is the explanation that makes the most sense to a human brain. Because the alternative is harder to sit with. The alternative is that it knew you were gone, that it tracked your departure. That something in that small, precise, 8-eyed brain filed away the direction you went and kept that location active while you were out of sight. That alternative is not a feeling. It is what the science actually shows. Welcome back. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe before you keep watching. Because what you're about to learn happens in your room with your spider every single time you leave. And most people who share their space with a jumping spider have been watching this happen without understanding what they were seeing. Today, we're going to walk through exactly what your jumping spider does the moment you leave the room. What is happening in its eyes, what is happening in its brain, why the door specifically, and what the behavior of waiting tells you about what this animal has already decided about you. Stay until the end, because the last thing we cover is something that changes the way most people think about what it means to be known by a creature this small. The moment you stand up and move toward the door, something activates in your jumping spider that is unlike anything happening in a standard spider. Most spiders perceive the world through vibration and shadow, motion. The presence of something large and potentially dangerous triggers a freeze or a retreat. That is the end of the processing. Jumping spiders process differently, fundamentally differently. Their anterior median eyes, the two large forward-facing eyes you have looked into, are not compound eyes. They are simple lenses, technically similar in structure to a telephoto camera lens, capable of producing an image with a resolution that, for their size, rivals the visual acuity of animals many times larger. When a jumping spider looks at you, it is not detecting your shape, it is reading your face. A study published in the journal Vision Research found that jumping spiders can resolve detail at distances far beyond what was previously thought possible for an animal with a brain their size. The neural tissue dedicated to processing visual information in jumping spiders, relative to total brain volume, is proportionally enormous. They are built for seeing in a way that most arthropods simply are not. So when you stand up and walk toward the door, your jumping spider is not registering a large moving shape. It is watching you, specifically, with detailed resolution. It is tracking your movement through the room with its eyes and, when necessary, rotating its entire body to keep you in its primary visual field. And then you step through the door. The question of what happens in the moment you disappear is where things get genuinely surprising. In most animals, out of sight means out of mind, in a very literal, neurological sense. The stimulus is gone. The processing stops. There is no representation of the absent thing held in active memory. Jumping spiders are a documented exception to this. A landmark study conducted by researchers at the University of Canterbury placed jumping spiders in a situation where they could observe prey moving behind an obstacle. The prey disappeared from view. Then, in some trials, the prey reappeared from the wrong side of the obstacle, a location inconsistent with the direction it had been traveling. The spiders reacted to the violation. They searched in the correct location first. When the prey appeared from the wrong direction, the spiders showed behavioral responses that researchers interpreted as consistent with a violated expectation. The prey had not simply ceased to exist when it left view. The spider held a representation of where it should be and was confused when reality didn't match. This capacity to hold a representation of something absent in a specific location and update a search based on that is called object permanence. It is one of the cognitive benchmarks researchers use when studying more complex animals. Jumping spiders, with a brain smaller than a sesame seed, have been shown to possess it. When you leave the room, your spider is not simply waiting for a stimulus to return. It is holding a location. It knows which direction you went, and some part of that active spatial model keeps the door the last place you were flagged. That is why the door. There is another layer to this, and it is the one most people find hardest to accept. The spider waiting at the door is not waiting for any person. It is waiting for you. Research on jumping spiders in captivity, particularly work done with Phidippus regius, the species most commonly kept as companions and most frequently seen in North American homes, has documented a consistent pattern. Spiders regularly exposed to a specific individual show behavioral differences toward that person compared to strangers. They are less likely to retreat. They are more likely to orient and approach. They move toward familiar people in ways they do not move toward unfamiliar ones. This is not taming in the traditional sense. Taming generally implies suppression. The animal suppresses its fear response through repeated exposure until it no longer feels threatened. What researchers observe in jumping spiders appears to be something more specific. The spider appears to have filed you as a distinct entity in its model of the world. Not just large, non-threatening presence, you. The specific pattern of movement, proportion, color, and behavior that is you. And that filing has location information attached to it. When you're in the room, you are a feature of the spider's active environment. When you leave, you don't vanish from that model. You simply become a feature that is currently located behind the door. Now think about what this means for the behavior you've been watching. The spider moves toward the door because the door is where you went. It positions itself at the nearest point to you, not because it is programmed to wait, not because of some ancient instinct laid down for this specific scenario, but because its cognitive map of its environment currently has you located on the other side of that wall, and it is oriented toward you. It is not missing you in the emotional sense that we use the word, but it is tracking you. It knows you are gone. It knows, in whatever spatial, cognitive sense a jumping spider knows anything, which direction you went. And it waits. There is something about that, something about a creature the size of a thumbnail, with a brain smaller than a grain of rice, holding your location in its mind, because you left the room that lands differently once you actually understand what is happening. Most people who share their space with a jumping spider describe the relationship as unexpected. They noticed the spider one day on the wall, on a windowsill, moving across the ceiling. They watched it for a moment out of curiosity, and then at some point they realized the spider was watching back, tracking them across the room, tilting its head when they made a sudden movement, waiting near the door, and something shifted in how they thought about what was sharing their space. The reason that shift happens, I think, is this. We are not used to being known by something that small. We extend the idea of recognition, of memory, of relationship to animals that have fur, that have faces shaped like ours, that have eyes positioned forward like ours. Dogs, cats, the mammals we have shared space with for thousands of years. We understand their awareness of us because it mirrors the kind of awareness we have of them. A jumping spider looking at you from across the room through 8 eyes, 2 of them locked onto your face with the focused precision of something that has processed your image and filed it. That is a different kind of knowing. It takes a moment to fully accept that it is real, but it is real. The spatial memory is real. The individual recognition capacity is real. The behavior of waiting, of orienting, of tracking, these are not projections. These are documented, measurable responses that researchers have worked to understand and have found to be consistent. Your spider knows which room you're in. It knows when you have left. It knows which direction you went. And the next time you come back through that door and find it closer to you than it was when you left, you will know what that means. It was waiting for you, not for something, not for anyone, for you specifically, the way it has learned to recognize you, the way it has filed you into its map of everything that matters in its world. You are in there. You have been in there for longer than you realized. Before I go, I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer in the comments, because the people in this community share things that genuinely stop me when I read them. Has your jumping spider ever done something that made you pause? A moment where you realized it was aware of you in a way you hadn't expected? Maybe it waited near the door. Maybe it tracked you across the room without moving away. Maybe it tilted its head at you in a way that felt less like a spider and more like something trying to figure you out. Tell me about it. What was the moment, and what did it change about how you think about what is sharing your space? I'll see you in the next one.